2-1. Good evening and welcome back, Poetry Lovers. It is I, ZM Wise, and here I am with another interview just for you. Tonight we are proud to have Miss Kristin Garth all the way from Pensacola, Florida. Kristin Garth is a pushcart and Best of the Net nominated poet from Pensacola, a knee sock enthusiast, and a sonnet stalker. Her sonnets, poetry, fiction, and essays have appeared in a ridiculous number of publications. She has a poetry dollhouse chapbook entitled Pink Plastic House, available from Maverick Duck Press, and a collaborative erotic chapbook entitled Good Girl Games, available from the same press. She has another collaborative chapbook entitled On This Path We Travel, available from Moonchaps, and a forthcoming solo digital micro chapbook from the same press entitled Sock Slut, featuring sonnets read by the poet and knee sock photography. She has a collaborative chapbook on abuse, Pensacola Girls, available from Bone and Ink Press. She has a chapbook forthcoming in January 2019 from the Hedgehog Poetry Press entitled Shakespeare for Sociopaths. In March of 2019, she has a chapbook, Puritan You, being published by Rhythm and Bones Lit. In April, she has a full-length poetry book, Candy, Cigarette, Woman, Child, Noir, being published also by Hedgehog Poetry. She is co-editing 2 anthologies, You Are Not Your Rape and Mansion. You Are Not Your Rape is a sexual assault anthology co-edited with Tiana G. Hansen to be published in November of 2019 by Rhythm and Bones. Mansion is a Slenderman/creepypasta anthology co-edited with Justin Karcher to be published by Dancing Girl Press. She has a weekly poetry/interview column entitled The Sonnetarium and a monthly annotated poetry column, Past Notes and Poems, which are both sponsored by Rhythm and Bones Lit. Follow her on Twitter at Lola and Jolie. It's one word, Lola and Jolie. Welcome to the show, Kristin. How are you feeling on your first interview?
I'm feeling great. I was a little nervous, but I feel pretty good.
Well, that is wonderful. I'm proud to have you on here. I consider it an honor and a privilege. So, to get started, why don't you tell me some of your earliest influences in the arts in general? It doesn't have to be limited to poetry. It could be music, visual arts, film, whatnot.
Actually, my first real experience that spoke to me as a poet was when I was in elementary school. We had a person come, a poet, and his name is going to escape me because I was in elementary school, very young, but he was from the Ozark Mountains, and he came and he did a reading, and it was amazing because I always associated artistic people, poetry, things like that with being people from big cities or people that were not like me, and I came from a city that was 5,000 people. So, to have this man who had this life kind of even maybe more simple than mine, it was very empowering. And it informed something in me that, I had something to say and that I was as valid as any other artist or, person in an academic position or whatever. It immediately spoke to me.
Wonderful. I'm sure that helped shaped a lot of your work, for sure. Could you let us in and maybe give us some insight on the step-by-step writing process of yours?
Well, I think a lot of people think because you write formal poetry that you think a lot about the process. And to me, honestly, I will say I think less about the process than maybe people that I know that I work with that write free verse poems who, have perhaps a lot more decisions to make about form, whereas my decisions are, a lot of them are already made, but then, I feel free to go crazy with, content, because I already, I know how long it's going to be. I know how much room I have, and I relate sonnets to being like a cage, and I like a cage because I think you can go crazy inside of a cage and you feel safe, and that's whereas to me, the idea of like talking about something that was very sexual assault or molestation or something like that in a free verse form, which I have a little bit, for example, in Candy Cigarettes. I have prose poems inside of it, but it was a real challenge doing this, and I felt vulnerable in a way that I feel safe in my sonnets because I know exactly how long, and know exactly when it will end and how I have to work with that, and I like those parameters. So, anyway.
Splendid. Well, and that's actually perfect because it sort of segues into the next question. Why sonnets in particular, Kristin, and what attracts you about them? And what was your first experience writing them?
I think my first experience was non-consensual. It was after school and just to exercise in class of, being told, oh, we're going to do this, and I had no interest in doing it. It came inside of me, but at the same time, I liked it. There's something like a puzzle, and figure out how in this small frame I'm going to say everything I have to say, because irony is, even though I'm like a shy person, I'm a long-winded person, and it was a struggle to make myself be more succinct and bold and decisive, and all those reasons, it just spoke to me, and once I started writing them, it was just natural to me, and it was a comfort.
That's the perfect description for sure. I've never heard it quite like that before. Now, although you'll be sharing two pieces at the end of this, do you have? Is there a sonnet of yours, or maybe even a sonnet written by someone else from the past that stands out to you in a way?
This might be a controversial answer, but I don't read a lot of songs. I read, I love Shakespeare. I mean, and one thing I should clarify is that all my sonnets are Shakespearean sonnets, and people sometimes will ask to write this kind, and I never have. That's all I've ever written. So, I wrote a sonnet, I guess, in a way that's in Shakespeare Theopas called Interrupted, and it's about, I think a lot of my situation sonnets that I think I have a CD, and I think that it, shows up by writing an obsession about that, and particularly that, I'm pretty stringent, or I am very stringent about the sonnets that I write, though I do, sometimes I like the challenge of when I can make them either more rhymey and more lyrical, or verses, like I like sometimes to make them where they could mistaken for free verse. I think that's like a big success. I'll have a person say, oh, I really like that poem you wrote on it, and I'm like, yeah, it was, but I made it. I like when it can escape feeling like the form, and conversation. My sonnet Kristin's is that way, and it touches best to me. But I also love the lyricals. So, anyway.
Yes, they are very lyrical indeed. So, Please tell me, because ever since we've started talking, I've noticed this and everyone else on Twitter has noticed this as well. Please tell me the fascination with knee socks and the craze behind them.
Well, I think, again, probably that anything that I like, I'm kind of obsessive about, and I call myself a sonnet stalker, and that's not, really a joke, but I definitely have a character in my novel that I'm writing that has OCD. I definitely think I have OCD, but I have never been, I don't go to counseling now, or I've never been diagnosed, but it's called that, and I think that I think that anything is for, like, I have them on right now. You see me because the only way I could do this interview was I to show my face, because I've never even done a audio interview, and it's a big challenge. But there are security blankets that you wear, and I have a friend that said once, knee socks are like hugs, and I think that's very true for me. And if I'm in any situation where I'm nervous, I will definitely have on knee socks, and I feel, and even stripping, it I always did that job in schoolgirl outfits or their uniforms, and it was a challenge to me because I'm people are always confused because they think if you're shy, you do that job, and I think it's just Beyonce, is she has a name for a self that does that job, and all strippers have stripper names and personas, even ones who don't wear a traditional costume. Nobody goes by their real names. In fact, in my novel, I have a character who they had a real name and a fake real name, or their dancer name and a fake real name, because customers assume you have another persona, and so they ask you your real name. And that comes from my real experiences. The girls I worked with all had fake real names so that they could, tell some man and make them feel intimate, when it was also another little ruse. And because it makes them, comfortable. That's how they felt comfortable doing their job. I mean, I think, those kind of things that help us get through situations. And knee socks, I always wore either ankle socks or knee socks every day that I stripped for 5 years. I never showed my toes. I wrote a poem about that. So it was a security blanket like anything else. But
so, Kristin, why don't you tell me a little bit about the origin of this poetic opera that's more of a collaborative project between you and two others. Tell us about that.
This is one of my favorite things to talk about right now. A Victorian dollhousing ceremony came from my dream. I had a dream one night, and I guess it was more of a nightmare, that a wizard struck me down and kept me in a dollhouse, and there was a third character that was involved. It was a frenemy female character, but it was very small, and just basically that brought me to this wizard, and this is what happened. And I wrote immediately. It was one of those things where I woke up and I sat down and wrote a sonnet about it that Mojave Heart published, and I sent it immediately to my friend Justin Carter, who I share. We were doing an anthology together, and I sent him poems sometimes, just back and forth, whatever. And he he read it and started talking, and I just said something about it, was sticking with me. It just felt bigger than this poem, and he said, "Oh yeah, it's that the male character. I just love the male character in this," and the way he said it and called him a character, I thought, oh, this is like a little play, and so immediately we had already been talking about doing something creative together because we do this anthology, but you're not. I mean, we curate other people's stuff or whatever, but we wanted to write something together because both of us. One thing I really respect about him is, he totally has like championed my sonnets. Like when, when I started at first, I got a lot of rejections. A lot, and I got there were a lot of people who some have that have come around, but that just wanted to write me off because I don't like sonnets. I mean, I still get occasionally somebody that will say, you can submit here, but we don't read sonnets. We don't read formal poetry. They just write it off. And he was never like that. He, in fact, nominated me for my poetry that he published, with the Ghost City Review. And, he always appreciated, that I had my own style and voice. And I really liked his style. So, and it's hard sometimes, I think, when, you're going to meet people and do a collaboration. I think one thing that can happen is if you have, like, somebody who's a strong writer, that there's that people might decide, I'm going to try to write with them. We need to collaborate. It needs to be the same. And I think the best collaborations are when people can, write in their own style, and they can, stand there as, individuals and, shine for who they are. And I knew, he would do that. I knew, and he would want me to, we wouldn't worry about, trying to make our styles be the same. Well, after he kind of grudgingly agreed to go on this journey, because, it was a commitment of, okay, well, what's this going to become, and, everything else. But he agreed, and I was telling Tiana, my friend, about it, and she said, oh, but there's another character, and a female character, and I was like, yeah, I don't really know, anything about it, but you're welcome to write it and see where it goes. And she has just blossomed that part. I mean, it was nothing like when in the dream, it was just a very side character, and her character, it's become a opera of three, strong individuals that all write in their own style, and her character, she has a huge backstory that has become phenomenal, and she's writing like the best poems I've ever read of hers. And I mean, she's a great writer. So it's all of us have grown during this project, and it's just so, it just makes me excited talking about it, because we're already at almost 80 pages, and it's definitely going to be a long book, and it's just packed of great poems and fantasy, a little horror. It's just a dream project, and they're like my dream team. So.
Oh, that is just incredible, amazing, and the power of collaboration is just indescribable on its own, and it really does help you not only grow as a person involved in the arts, as a creator, but also as a person as well, and you get to have that creative energy just reverberate off of each other. So, going just a bit off topic here, out of curiosity, and there's no right or wrong answer to this, of course. What poem and song describe your life?
Oh, I'm gonna have a panic attack right now. Gosh. All my poems describe my life. I'm gonna take little detour from your question to say this. I'm going to read one of the poems I'm going to read to you at the end of this. Is called "SONNETEER," and so many people, because they're so used to me writing a lot of biographical material, they think, I write this poem about a senator in a power imbalance situation, and I have had so many people write to me and go, who was it? What politician was this that you were with? And and it's actually a poem about a movie that I watched that I thought was a great story and everything else, but not all of my poems, come from my life, and that's definitely one that doesn't. But it makes me feel good that people think it could have, because I think it makes it that I did a good job. It was believable. But I just think it's one thing that happens to you, when you are a person that writes autobiographical material a lot, is that people just assume that everything you do is. And it's kind of been the fun thing of writing fantasy. I also have a little book coming out from 30 West publishing house called The Legend of the Weremere. And it was a tiny little book that I just got picked up, and it's, again, another fantasy about a mermaid that when she turns 14, all of a sudden, with puberty, every night, she turns into a woman, and so she can't live in the water. She has to live half her life on land and half her life in the water, and she has no skills. And I'm going to read you something from that later when we do our little separate poetry reading, but that I like unwritten fantasy, because then it becomes obvious that obviously I'm not a mermaid, or I'm not, although I do love bathtubs a lot, and I think of myself in some ways as a mermaid, so maybe it is a little bit, but I like the book I'm working on, the other fantasy book. I mean, I'm dissecting fireflies, and there's wizards and magic, and it's obviously not a real universe, and it's very freeing, and I like kind of being obviously not autobiographical too. So I'd say, I guess I completely went off track on your question, but a lot of my poetry is about myself, but a lot of it is not too, and anyway.
No, definitely great answer. And out of curiosity, like, are there any poems or songs, just musical pieces that have been written by others that you can sort of relate to?
Oh gosh, I mean, songs is a huge thing. Today, all I did was work on my novel. It's told in differing points of view, and I gave them all songs that they were listening to, every character that kind of expresses something that their character's about to go through. And I mean, I love music for sure. I feel so on the spot right now, because I'm like, I can't just come up with a song that says about my life. But from being when I was a stripper, I was exposed to so much different music than I ever listened to before, because I was not a person that listened to like heavy metal or things like that very much, but you hear everything there, and I love music. I guess I just can't answer that question. I'm sorry, I'm just drawing a blank of like a song that tells you about my life. I think it depends on, it's like minute to minute, I mean, today I'll give you one from a character that my character Jeffrey Chase, and maybe me being a little obsessive compulsive too. He was listening to the song Temptation by New Order, and that was in my head a lot today, so maybe I'll just answer with that.
Oh, that's a good song for sure. Now, sort of segueing into this, like, based off of one of your last answers, please tell me a little bit more about Candy Cigarette Woman Child Noir and the process of creation as far as that one is concerned.
Okay. Yeah, that's a very personal book, and something I always knew I would write. I wrote a poem called Girl with a Pen, and that's in that book, and it's talking about how when I was doing that job, I wasn't writing a lot of sonnets, although I did write one that I had published recently called The Sexual Hypocrite Has No Clothes, and it was something I wrote while I was stripping because, where, again, perhaps being in the puritanical South, there was, even in, amongst a bunch of girls who are stripping and, in the world of sex work, in a way, there was slut shaming and all that kind of situation, and I wrote a little poem about the experience of that, and how painful it was, like being in a bathroom stall, hearing people talk about you, and I remember finding it. I had written it a long time ago, while I was experiencing that, and I found it in a diary, and it was so like raw of a poem, and I was proud of myself that, like, I did that at the time because I really had abandoned writing at that point. I was more just trying to survive my life and make my independence, because I had been very financially dependent on people who abused me, so I didn't want to continue that, and so I just got to the point where I was in school, and people, I had a cushy life in a way because I wasn't having to provide for that, but at the same time it put me in a situation of vulnerability about being things happening or just in uncomfortable situations, and I just got to the point where I said, I don't, what's important to me right now is to be on my own, and I had gone to a strip club and with some people, and I had my hair in braids, and I was, I'm sure drinking, and I was 25 at this time, and and the manager came up and it was like, what what is your job and whatever, and I was like, I go to school, and he, just told me, well, we don't have anybody that looks like you. We don't have a schoolgirl, and you definitely would do well here. And it was just something like that hadn't even occurred to me that, I could, do this job. But once he said it, I just thought, because something about, I dressed the way that I dressed because that's how I felt. When I say Candy Cigarette Woman Child Noir, I am a woman child. No matter what age I am chronologically, I feel like a teenager, and that's kind of what Good Girl Games is about. I met a girl, another writer who, I shouldn't say girl, I'm a woman, but again, like me, another person like me who identifies a lot younger mentally, and she asked me, she goes, I've been reading your poems, and I wanted to know if you were a middle, and I didn't know what that word meant, and she said, well, it just means that, as the way you feel, you're a teenager. And I said, I guess that's what I would call woman child, which is what I always use, from early in my poetry writing to describe myself. And that's why we did that book. But it was the empowering thing about being a stripper and doing it the way that I did was that my costume that I wore was like my soul. It was exactly who I was, which is a double-edged sword in a way, because when you're rejected, you're being rejected for your soul, or when you're accused, as I would be sometimes, of this being an act, because I, made a lot of money, and when you are successful at anything, some people hate on you, and people would say, oh, yeah, the little schoolgirl act or whatever, and it absolutely wasn't an act. It was myself, but there's never. It was just the only other job I've ever had since then that was so much myself is being a writer, because I just felt so powerful, like that I could stand up in front of, and I haven't actually stood up in front of people, but doing this, or with my words I have, and just be yourself and be rewarded for it. That was the amazing thing. And like when I would meet people that got it, that saw it was myself and loved me for it, it was just very emotional. And I always knew I would write about that time of my life. I always knew Candy Cigarette would come to pass. I wasn't sure if it would be a novel or but I knew that I would write about it because it was such a special time.
Yeah. Oh my goodness. No, that was that sounds quite intense, but it's very inspirational in a way that, especially how you own yourself. You're in your natural element, and as you said, you're definitely rewarded for that. And there's no experience like that. Even if a person puts on a theatrical show of any type, whether it's with costumes or not, and the fact that you can have this persona that pretty much describes who you are, that's something else altogether. I'm speechless. Now, in your opinion, and there's no right or wrong answer for this either, in the field of the arts in general, whether it's writing, music, visual art, film, whatever, what have you, what could be improved greatly, in your opinion?
Well, I'll just talk about writing, and it's kind of what I talked about earlier, is that I do feel like people should be more open-minded, especially about things like form or style, or someone who writes a certain way. I mean, that's a resistance I met when I came onto the poetry scene, for sure. And I try myself, to be very open-minded, and I maybe, if anything, like, I sometimes I get people that say, oh, when I started the Sonnetarium and I'm publishing other people, they would go, oh, does it have to? And I would kind of become annoying to me, because I was like, why do you think I'm like closed-minded? But there are a lot of people that I think are closed-minded, perhaps the other way, that they, I don't want to read this kind of poetry. I don't want to, and I'm not, everyone has their preferences, and that's, valid. And I mean, there are, journals for all kinds of things. But I do think that people should look at poetry as poetry and less as a certain kind of form or category, just to be open to it and how it moves you. And I'd like to see more of that.
Right. No, agreed. It's exactly like that same. It's like that same issue on. There's pretty much two schools of thought on the separation of a poet and a writer. So on one hand, you have the group of people who they prefer not to be separated. Poets and writers are the same thing. They all write something. But then on the other hand, you have the group of people that claim, well, poets are not just writers. It's an experience. It's an otherworldly experience altogether. It's very interesting. I myself watch on the sidelines just to see how how it plays out, but I think both sides have merit to that. Just like what you were saying in this case, with, as you said, preferences are all well and good, but in this field, yeah, you definitely need an open mind. I agree. Now, what advice would you give to an aspiring writer who's just starting out, who's sort of timid, just afraid to get their work out there, who might need some encouragement, what would you say to them?
Oh gosh, I mean, I feel like, no matter, I don't think, I think we're all timid, I mean, I force myself, to be like prolific and be, send things out, and maybe I would say that, if you think that, oh, well, I'll be more courageous and then I'll be able to send things out. I don't know how that works for other people. I feel very timid still, but I just act against that instinct. Just like when you asked me to do this interview, like my instinct was to say, no, or let's maybe someday, or something. But sometimes you have to do things that are scary to you, and force yourself, and if I mean, that's obviously a personal decision too. I mean, I don't mean to say that that your feelings aren't valid. If some people don't have it, where they can't take criticism, or it's just too vulnerable to them, and I respect that, but like if it's just a matter of just some kind of smaller fear, I think you have to just ignore it. I mean, know that it's there and just say, you know what, when I write a poem, I send it out, and that's what I do. I mean, I write a poem and I send it out until it gets published. And I mean, if I'm not saying that, sometimes I write something and I go, oh, well, I need to maybe take another look at that, but most of the time, I'm gonna, once I feel it's finished, I write a poem and I send it out, even if it embarrasses me, which is many times. And I think people, as another issue, I think people think that if you write provocative poems, that you're this like super brave person, and that none of people's reactions to it bother you, or none of it. It's just easy, and it's not easy at all. Like for me, I just can only speak for myself, but it's very hard at times, and I just so you just have to ignore that if it's important.
Well, thank you very, very much for elaborating on that, and I hope the aspiring creators out there pay heed to her advice. These are sage words, people. Just saying. So, to conclude this interview, would you please indulge the audience and I by reading 2 of your pieces?
Okay. The first one that I was going to read is from Shakespeare for Sociopaths, which comes out in just a few weeks on my birthday, January 17th. And it's a sonnet that I wrote called SONNETEER. Senator, you have people. One drives me now, a cop, off duty. Knock, a giveaway before I see the holstered gun. Won't chat or stop until I'm locked behind your hotel door. You have me, younger than your daughter. All the hair I have removed or bleached at your request. Camera ready for your call to action. Think of them as me, but more. You have your friends. Ones like me who know the secret parts of you. Co-stars rotate inside my screens, a tiny tied-down show. The believers of your speeches, the great women's rights offender, except for mine. For them you hide. With me, you cross the line.
Ooh, well done. Oh my goodness. Yeah, I can kind of see where people would think, oh, it's probably about this person, or it's probably about that person. But that's the beauty of it, isn't it?
Yeah, and it is not about me, but I relate to the power and balance part, and also even in my time when I was a stripper, powerful people in the community that you see in a different light maybe than other people. if I didn't have this exact experience. I definitely had some, eye-opening experiences of people who had dark, secret lives. And this came actually from a movie, and I get a lot of praise about it, and I like that poem a lot, So there's a lot. Shakespeare for Sociopaths is all about dark characters from movies, from my imagination, from people that were in my bed, from stripping. So, all these different, facets of life. And I always wanted to write a book about dark characters because they're interesting and, fascinating and really shape us in different ways. And it was fun to be able to comment on that in different contexts.
Yeah, no, for sure. For sure. No, and I do appreciate you giving us some insight as far as that piece is concerned. And please share your second piece, if you will.
My second piece comes from the book Puritan You, and Puritan You is about my experience being at Brigham Young University when I was in college, and my family was Mormon, and I didn't have a lot of choices in life then. I would never have chosen to go to Brigham Young, and it was an experience, again, kind of like Candy Cigarette, where I knew I would write about this at some point because I just didn't know. I didn't grow up around people in Gulf Breeze, where my little suburb where I was from, who had a life like that most people chose, where they went to college or drove when they were 16. I didn't do those things. I didn't date. I had a lot of rules, and I lived really, really sheltered, and that's a very those two things together, it was a lot. So this poem is called Morphine Means Truth, and it's about the only time that I got an apology for things that happened to me when I was younger. And it happened when the person who's apologizing was under morphine, and it was so ironic to me because I felt like I should have been the one under morphine, and it just made me angry in the moment. And it took me years to write this poem, but anyway, I'll read it to you. Morphine means truth. Apology, he gives anesthetized, post-op, private, besides a public bed. You shouldn't be afraid. Advised to save his life, remove all cancer, shed ability to actualize devised desire, too weak to wield his weight, creates with brown eyes bold, bedside, a favored 5-year-old you never want to be. Awaits meat peaks, morphine he weeps, his words so slurred, you catch just 5. How long I hurt you. Truth that you've survived but never heard. Comfortable, confesses, candid, curt, that your unmedicated feels obscene. All pain he gives to you without morphine.
Very, very nice. Thank you very, very much for that. Now, as we wave bye-bye for now, do you have any final words for the audience?
I'm just so happy to be a part of Poetry Twitter, and all the friends that I've made there, and all the journals that have published me, and given me a chance to speak my truth, and just all the opportunities. It's just changed my life, and I'm endlessly grateful for it, and thank you all.
You heard it from her. Let's give a nice warm round of applause. If you're out there listening to Miss Kristin Garth, please be on the lookout for her future works. And again, follow her on Lola and Jolie on Twitter. And don't forget to visit her actual website, kristingarth.com. Poetry lives, long live the arts. And if you out there are listening, if you are a creator of any kind, whether your art is visual, oral, or written, please send me a direct message on Twitter. My Twitter is @ZMWisePoet, and we can talk about it. Other than that, thank you very much, Kristin, for being on, and have a pleasant evening.